Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurulé. And once again, we had a real nice pregame, but we kind of knew what was coming because we had agreed a couple weeks ago, Jim, to have this episode, which followed our three-part series about you interviewing me interviewing you, and both of us talking about our framework. And I think it's nice logical follow to focus this episode on our what would be called perhaps our origin story, how the podcast began, how Jim and I met, and why we started the podcast, and why we're very excited about the future of the podcast. Um, in we talked a little bit. I'm not really good with remembering the dates of things, but we did a little investigation before the show into when exactly, and it looks like we met about 5 years ago. It looks like, Jim. Seems like yesterday on some level. So, what you wanna tell everybody how we met, and then I'll throw my 2 cents back at you.
Yeah, it's to be fun. We're going to do somewhat of a timeline from the inception of when we first met and what inspired the podcast, the Imperfect Men's Club. The imperfection is the perfection, and and the framework that we created that we're constantly updating, but really think we got it to the point where we're going to talk a lot more about it, and even go as far as offering some services around that. So we're real excited about that. But yeah, just on a high level, the Imperfect Men's Club podcast is based on these 5 areas of your life in no particular order, and that starts with your life's work. That's as a man, big part of who we are comes from our life's work, whether that's our career or different stages of your life. So we talk about that. Also, our relationship with money, which is a big deal. So we get into the relationship, our relationship with the world. That's the world view, and our relationship with ourselves, our physical well being and our mental well being, and then our relationship with others, and that in two categories of men and women. So today we always seem to come back to the center of the wheel of life, or the flywheel, and that in the center is self awareness. Um, and then now I'm starting to add another word I like, alignment and connectivity. So self alignment too, and that's really what happened, Mark. We met during well, all times are eventful, but this is right around COVID or after COVID. So right around 2020, and I was struggling. I think I've talked about it when our last episode. Um, I had, um, I was struggling, and for the first time in my life, started to experience depression. And anybody that's had that, um, gone through that, is it's just paralyzing. It's so difficult to explain that. So I started to look for some help with the traditional um, healthcare system, and then soon find out that they were going to keep me sick the rest of my life. And did come across um, this this other technique, and that's how I met Mark. This process that was going on. I'll let you go more into that. Mark was came up, and at that time, that's what you were doing. That's part of your background. So I'll let you kind of take it from there, and then we'll fill in. But yeah, tell us about what what you were doing, and a little bit about that
Yeah,
technique. Or
yeah. I just recently spoke to a woman I met during that time as well, who's doing her own thing now in the RRT space. They don't like to call it a therapy because I think that implies, someone's broken, and, it's like not using the word problem in marketing, instead using the word challenge. It's semantics, but I get it. But it basically, I was a consultant at an institute where I was fielding incoming calls from people that found out about the program and were curious, and I was frontline, there to explain what it was and answer questions and sign people up that wanted to come. And you called in. I don't
Mhm.
remember how you found us, but you called in, and I answered the call, probably called you back, but we just started talking, shooting the shit. You were telling me what was going on. You told me what you knew about the program. Um, and I was in that position for a number of years and have been intrigued by well-being my whole life. So I'm pretty well practiced and pretty well investigated that stuff. But I think I remember talking to you about the fact that you thought maybe what was going on was connected to two things: getting older, but also the number of concussions you had potentially experienced playing football and rugby and fighting a lot when you were a young kid, and then getting thrown through a car window when you were 18 or 19
Hmm.
by getting hit by a drunk driver. So your head was getting knocked around your whole life, and it was just
Hmm.
it came and settled in and became a somewhat relative depressive state. And I think no, I'm sure, because you've told me multiple times when we talk about this, you asked me a medical question, and I'm not a
Hmm.
medical doctor. So I said something to you like, which I do with everybody when I don't know something. I said, you know what, Jim, I don't know, but I have access to the guy that does, and I'll go find out and we'll talk again.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's when you started to feel like, hey, I think I can maybe trust this guy. I kind of like this guy. I like the way he
Hmm.
talks. I like the way he carries himself. And I felt the same way, even though I
Hmm.
was in a different role. And ironically, we talk about agency all the time and advocacy on behalf of our prospects and clients and
Hmm.
people we mentor. I then became your advocate, your agent in that
Yeah,
particular
yeah.
moment.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the word agency because it's going to go full circle, right? You were the agent for this particular person that was doing this. But the other thing, again, at the time, it was so we they don't at that time they didn't know. They thought, okay, what's going on in his head. So they were doing the traditional stuff that you do when somebody's saying that they're struggling. But in terms of the concussions and all those things, I don't really know how much that had to do with it. But I remember making the decision that I'm not going to stay sick for the rest of my life if I go
Mm-hmm.
through the traditional protocol. And that's when I said I believe in the police placebo effect. I mean it's a known, right, that you could. It's also when I started to understand how the human brain functions or how it evolves. You can retrain these neural pathways, like a lot of things I do, I'm audiodidactic, meaning I taught myself enough to understand how the human brain functions and how you can retrain your brain to think. It's just different pathways and so on. But yeah, the one of the spec scan was the technology that was able to take pictures of your brain and determine if there was something wrong. It's the same uh, technology that's used in the NFL concussion protocol. Um, so you helped me. I think that's what I said. I said, hey, I'd like to come out there because I'm in California. You're in Orlando to do this. It wasn't covered by insurance, so I was paying cash for it. But I wanted to make sure that I could get this spec scan because that was very expensive in California. It would take months to get if you could even get one. And you helped coordinate that, and that's when I decided to take the trip. But yeah, you mentioned agency. You're an agent, and we're going to talk more about the importance of the right agent at the right time to help you get through difficult times or get to live your best self to help you go beyond these things that happen in life, and that's really what you've done all your life, right, Mark? That's what you did as far as career placement and job placement. So this is nothing new. It's
No,
kind of who you are.
yeah, it's an evolution of sorts. I think
Hmm.
yeah, one of the things that just struck me is, as we're thinking about why we did this, why we started the podcast. I remember now something we didn't cover in the pregame. I was very, very, very adamant about during the beginning of the time when people were starting to tell other people what they could and couldn't say, or where they could and couldn't go. I've always been rebellious about that up to a fault. And so I know when we started, once we kind of clicked after meeting, and you decided to come back after going through the protocol that you went through and having some good results. You were feeling better, and
Hmm.
and you were grateful, and we
Hmm.
decided, let's collaborate. And I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah. But
exactly.
I'll pick up where you left off on just on that. So when I did go out for the the visit or the treatment. I ended up getting an apartment. I think I was there for close to a week in Orlando because I was doing these different things. And then I said, hey, let's get together and have lunch or dinner. And we did. So I
Hmm.
think we met for a cup of coffee my last day on the way back.
Hmm.
And we hit it off. And that was very nice of you. Didn't have to do that. But that's when I think we met for the first time in person when I
Hmm.
was out there for that reason. And then we continued the conversation, and we got along. We obviously saw things the same way. It became more of kind of a political conversation, and then the idea came up about, hey, let's do a podcast.
Yeah.
And we had talked about it, and then I think I was out in Florida for some other reasons, and then decided to make a trip to Orlando, and we sat down and did a one day. I think it was more than that, maybe 2 day whiteboard. We
One
whiteboarded.
and a half, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was intense, and it was the perfect thing to do to uncover all the things that needed to be uncovered, and it
Yeah.
was very nuanced and it was very deep and it was a lot of fun. And I
Yeah.
know you took pictures of the whiteboard, so we still have
Yeah.
access to
Yeah.
that if our memories aren't
Yeah.
serving us properly. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I was really interested in having a platform to talk candidly about things that at the time people were telling me I shouldn't talk about
Hmm.
publicly.
That's right. It
You,
started off it was a political podcast in the
mm,
beginning, and because I remember the words, we spent some time on this. It was civil discord, I think
yeah,
is what
civil
was
discourse. Yeah, civil
civil
discourse. And
discourse. That's what it is. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had been
And
attending some events here locally, but I was not. I was really angry at some point. Was getting angry that people were actually telling me what I could say or what I couldn't say or what I
mhm,
shouldn't say, even
that's right.
worse. So that was only part of it. And
Mhm,
I remember, well, that's how we started to build our framework, which you've alluded to already. But it's like, well, are we just going to shoot the shit back and forth? Because that's not going to work, right? Let's have some
right.
structure.
Right.
Let's start talking about
Yeah.
structure. And that's, I think, the golden ticket for us is the this flywheel of life that we have come up with and have refined over the years and continue to refine, although it's in a very mature state right now, and we're very
Hmm.
comfortable with it. But it gives structure to the episodes that would otherwise maybe wander a little bit more than would be engaging or entertaining for people. And I don't need
Hmm.
to go over the framework because you've done that, but
Hmm.
it's really guided us, and we both had a lot of practice now. We've been doing this for 5 years, and we enjoyed it. And I think that one of the things that you and I talk about that I think is important in any agent client relationship where you're a trusted advisor to someone else and
Hmm.
bringing an objective opinion is that you have to have some structure around what you're doing,
Hmm.
and so that has sustained us. And I think we both have benefited and are appreciative of the two qualities that we give each other credit for. One is authenticity, and the other is consistency. Because
Yeah.
I think that's part and parcel of why we've been successful sustaining this, and now
Yeah.
we're excited about the future. That's we
Yeah.
can talk about that towards the end, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
good
I
stuff.
think the other thing is also you realize in life it's the right people at the right time, and also the power of two. Trying to do a podcast by yourself, I think I made some attempts at it or to try to create content. It was very difficult. So we
Hmm.
had a dynamic, and we obviously had common values, common beliefs, but we're also very different in versatile. So you started to realize, hey, these two personalities, these two perspectives complement one another, which is
Hmm.
applies to everything in life. So I think we started to develop a mutual appreciation for our differences. Not that we
Yeah, and
were,
and then I had access to my eldest daughter, who was a
that's right. Yeah.
film major and a podcaster herself,
Yeah.
and we engaged her for the first 5 episodes because I think we had been told, or
That's
I had
right.
been told, and she was supportive of this fact that don't tell anybody what you're doing until you have at least 5 episodes in the can.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah. She was very helpful.
she brought graphic design, she brought content creation structure,
Hmm.
she did some music, an intro and an outro, and she
Yep.
did the editing work, and we paid her for that work. And
Hmm.
then after the 5 episode commitment, which we
Hmm.
all agreed to, she said to me something along the lines of, "Dad, I'd love to continue to help you, but I'm getting busy in my own business, so I'm going to leave you
Hmm.
guys alone and wish you the best of luck. And I don't remember my initial reaction to that, but it probably was something like, "Oh, fuck," you know? And so we didn't know what to do. And you can correct me
Yeah,
on
no,
this
she
if I,
was great. I think you said without her, she created the structure. She was like the project manager, but she had a background in that industry. So I thought that if it probably wasn't for her, we would never have got it, the first 5 episodes done. She really created the uh, the framework that we needed to just do something, knowing it was
yeah.
not going to be great, and it was very different than it is today. So I'm glad you mentioned her because without her, I just don't think it would have happened. And
Oh,
that's
I
kind of where we're at
agree. I
now, right?
agree.
5 years later. Yeah,
It certainly would have been a lot more
yeah,
difficult because we didn't know what we were doing, but she did, you
yeah,
know. And
yeah,
then we learned, and I don't remember how much time elapsed, but I want to say about a year. We just stopped. But I don't ever
yeah.
remember agreeing that we either one of us wanted to stop. We were still very interested in continuing this, and I don't maybe we weren't sure whether or how we could get back to it. But one day
Yeah.
it dawned on me that what if we just recorded the episode, didn't bother with any editing, which makes it raw and authentic, right?
Yeah.
No music, no fancy graphics, and I'll take the burden of, you know, downloading from your Zoom account the files. I'll edit the beginning and the end, just snip off anything that's before the actual start and
Hmm.
snip off the end if it's uncomfortable. And and then we already had the platform because our my daughter had set it up for us. So
Right.
Libsyn, and I post it to Libsyn, and that Libsyn sends it out to 6 or 7 other of the major podcast platforms. And I would create from the transcript, I would create some show notes and come up with some titles, and it became, you know, a weekly small amount of work. And it wasn't like a magical idea, but it freed us both up. It was like, man,
Hmm.
that sounds that why didn't we think about that? Why did that take a year to think about that? But we jumped
Yeah.
back in season 2,
Yeah.
and it was about a year
Yeah. I
later.
do remember though that we did have, I wouldn't say a conflict, but we come to a point where it was becoming more of a political show. And I remember saying, "Hey, Mark, if you want to do political politics, go ahead, but I'm not in on going full on politics. I
Yeah.
just think that, and again, I think we were respecting each other's position. So you pulled back. I think I pulled back, and we are who we are. So it's not like we're hiding our politics. But I didn't want it to be a political show, and
Yeah, no, I think that's a good
and
call. I think that's a
yeah,
good call. And but what's funny is, and you're the one who says it all the time, everything's
yeah.
political, you know. It's like I think I began with that phrase
No,
and you
that
grabbed onto
actually,
it.
Mark, that was you. You said,
Yeah,
Jim, everything's political. And I remember
yeah,
going, no, it's not true. And then, of course, now, 5 years, it is. Everything is political. It becomes
yeah.
political, especially if you look at where it starts and where it ends, whether it's local, federal, or even global, it becomes political eventually. And
Well,
it was a very divided time, and
yeah.
we're still even more divided. But I mean, think about who was the president. It was, I think, during an election, so there was a lot of change going on in terms of it was also the peak of BLM and political correctness, probably the worst time in America
Yeah,
for
yeah, and
that.
that's why I think I'm really kind of proud that we kind of stayed the course and said, no, we're not going to deep dive into politics, but we're not going to avoid them altogether either, you
Yeah.
know. And so, and you know what would be funny is if we had the recordings of our pre-games because we're not very shy about politics in the pre-game, but it also
Yeah.
helps flush out issues, right?
Yeah.
So so we're like I think we have 130 episodes now,
Wow.
and we've got some exciting things upcoming, but I don't want to blow by, you know, the origin of it all. I think we've missed Jim 2 weeks in 5 years, aside from the time we took off. I think
Yeah.
we've missed two,
Yeah.
and one of them
I,
was around Christmas.
yeah. I'm a big believer in the 5,000 hour rule. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard 10,000 hours, and I've heard five
There's
years.
5,000. There's the 10,000 in
Yeah,
that, and I like everything. It gets criticized, but the the origin of that comes from how people used to learn before there was universities and books and things like that. But everything was done through an apprenticeship, and in order to um, become a journeyman, you had to do 5,000 hours of apprenticeship in order to go out and make money. So I was
Hmm.
a apprentice cabinet maker, but back in the day, way back, you couldn't go out and charge for your services until the person you worked under signed off and said, okay, yeah, you're ready. And then you go out and start your own business and do your own thing. It's like
Yeah.
shoemakers and,
Yeah.
uh, you know, all those different trades were built on
Blacksmiths. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
so,
it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. My mentor in the recruiting space, Paul, who you've met over the phone. I remember him telling me in one of our first interactions, it's going to take you 5 years before you know what you're doing,
oh,
and
interesting.
that's 10,000 hours, two
Yeah.
thousand hours a year. So,
Yeah. Paul's a
um, I
good guy.
yeah,
It was good
it was
advice.
I think that's a Malcolm Gladwell thing, that
Well,
10,000
he
hour thing.
challenged it and he wrote a book and yeah, I think it was a good book. I listened to it a couple times, but it was more challenging it whether it's true or not. I think anything you do have to do any to be good at something, you have to do it many times, fail, correct yourself, fail.
Yeah, yeah.
It's part of the process.
I've said many times, I can't think of anything that I've ever, excuse me, accomplished that I would call worthwhile, like something
Hmm.
that the world may benefit from, that I
Hmm.
have not accomplished by doing small things consistently over long periods of time.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
the same concept. And I think we'll build that into our service offering as well. It's
Yeah.
not the stuff that we help people with or will help people with, and I'm doing some of it already, and you have done it. We both done it our whole lives,
Hmm.
in some way, shape, or form. Is
Yeah.
This is not a switch that you can flip on. If you're stuck or
Mm.
you're anxious or you're depressed or you're just not where you want to be and you're a man, we're not going to come in and hand you the golden ticket. It's not Willy Wonka. It's like
Mm.
the work is going to be there. It's going to be hard. And when you leave our nest over whatever period of time after we're done, you're going to be, if you don't continue to do it, it's not going to work. I talk, my middle daughter, as you know, Jim, is in the gut health business, and her biggest
Mhm.
frustration is I lay a solution on the table for women, and a significant percentage of them, even though they know it'll work, there's proof that it works. They can't sustain consistently over a period of time the lifestyle changes, and it's unfortunate. And
Mhm.
I've had that same experience in the career space. If you lean back into your bad habits, and we all do, you know, that
Mhm.
whatever it is you're trying to fix is not going to get fixed. That's just the
Yeah.
reality of the situation.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, Mark, before we wrap this one up, I want to talk a little bit about agency and self-agency because it's something that I've done all my life. I owned a sales agency representing kitchen cabinet manufacturers. Again, sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of product. You owned an agency, right?
Hmm.
It's just a different kind. Uh, but as we continue to refine our 5 areas of our life in the center, just the library of the selves just continues to grow. Uh, Self dignity comes up a lot. I think as a man, you need self dignity. That's what I'm going to start to add and use more, but also self agency. And I put that in the chat. So why don't you read that for us? And then I'd like your thoughts on about agency, hiring an agency. And that's also reminds me of what inspired the podcast because um, when I was very involved in rugby and I ended up meeting, at the time, he was one of the best rugby players in the world. Was from the San Francisco Bay Area, but he was being represented by a European agency, and the owner of that agency also represented some of the biggest names in European football and rugby. And so I was in London and had dinner with his wife. She's American. Ended up becoming pretty good friends with the guy. It was just fascinating to hear him talk about what he does as an agent for these world class athletes. And often it wasn't just taking the money; it was managing their mind and really putting value on uh, the short careers that they have to the market to negotiate with the different teams. And then
Yep.
you've also heard me talk about another very good friend of mine was a Major League Baseball manager,
Hmm.
and I've shared the story when I was at his office. They were playing the New York Yankees, and he was had the press and everybody's office. I was in his office waiting for him, and he had just had a meeting with the pitcher that had signed a $40 million contract, and my friend was kind of laughing, saying, "Yeah, he just signed this." And I thought to myself, well, he didn't sign it. It was his agent that was able to negotiate that. Because often you need somebody that's not close to it, or that's not as attached, emotionally attached to your value to the world,
Hmm.
and that's what an agent does. So yeah, I'd like your thoughts about agency, and why don't you, if you could, just read that what I put in the chat, and then we'll expand
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah. Self-agency or personal agency is the psychological sense of being in control of one's life, actions, and decisions. It involves setting goals, taking initiative, and believing that one's actions lead to desired outcomes. High self-agency is characterized by proactivity, self-reflection, and taking responsibility rather than feeling like a victim of circumstances.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, Jim, and it's all good stuff. I think, just to stack on top of what you're talking about, what you did, and this gentleman that you referred to, the sports agent, my most of my career was spent helping people find jobs and then training
Hmm.
my employees on how to do that as well. So you're taking this really important decision. What are you going to do next for a living? And then you're diving in contextually to everything that might ping off of that. It's all self-reflection. It's all
Hmm.
I'm acting as the agent. I'm bringing a mirror to the room and
Hmm.
making the person look into it and say, let's make sure we button all these things up. And I would say a significant percentage of what I used to help people with and will continue to help people with is stuff that they may even already know, but they needed to hear it from somebody else. And they needed to
Hmm.
hear it at the right time. And they needed to hear it from the right person. You had coaches your whole life, so did I. Coaches would often, I reflect back, particularly in baseball and basketball, I reflect back to that guy said the same thing that the other guy said, but I didn't like the
Hmm.
other guy and I wasn't ready to hear it. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of that in the work that we do, and yeah,
Yeah, but
it's a big
I'm
deal.
glad you mentioned coaching, because I do think there's a difference between a coach and a consultant. And
No question.
agency, I'm creating really a new category of how important this is, especially if you want to live your best self. This is the kind of the next level. It's not for everybody, right? But if you really, and I put something else on the screen, back to the components of self agency, because that's something. Sure, you do that on your own, but you need somebody that really has the life experiences, the wisdom, and perspective maybe that you don't have as
Yeah.
an individual.
Yeah, let me read those. Those are good. The key
Mm-hmm.
components of self-agency: intentionality, proactively setting goals and acting with purpose; forethought, planning, anticipating consequences and self-regulating; self-reactiveness, the ability to motivate and monitor actions; and self-reflection, analyzing and evaluating experiences for personal growth. We were talking about sports agents in the pregame, and you said something along the lines, and I think this is the whole ball game. It's like, what are you managing on behalf of the athlete? Well, yeah, you're
Mm-hmm.
negotiating contracts. You probably have someone
Mm-hmm.
in your office that might help manage his financial assets, or he might outsource that to someone else. But you're managing his mind. You're managing his
Mm-hmm.
outlook.
Yep, that's right.
You're managing his mental energy and his emotional energy, and perhaps even issues of self-doubt or confidence. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a psychologist, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like I'm not a psychologist, but I play one on TV kind of thing. It's
Yeah,
I've been in sessions that felt like therapy plenty of times, but I think it's just human nature, all of us,
yeah.
because you operate as my agent quite often in these conversations, and I
Mm-hmm.
operate as yours. I've helped you with speeches, you've helped me with
Yeah.
scenarios and situations in my life where I just wanted your opinion. You validated me on a number of occasions, so I didn't think I was crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
a couple of times you said, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
so I think that you have to have some human qualities, and I think we both are
Mm-hmm.
fortunate to have them. I think humility is one of them. As a matter of fact,
No,
I
no
told you
question.
recently that
Yeah.
one of my friends that listens to the podcast said he was fascinated by how humble you were. And I made it a point to share that with you because I don't know that you give yourself enough credit for that. nor that you need to, I suppose, but it's nice to hear that kind of feedback. Objectivity. And then I think
Yeah.
there's a certain sense of just non-judgmental, not this men in particular, which we are struggling, I think, in the world today, maybe even more so than they've ever been from my
Hmm.
perspective. And we've talked about that a lot. And I had my own struggles, and you just described some of yours. And they're not small events. They're very
Hmm.
important. They're life-changing things. And
Yeah.
when you can come in with some experience and some wisdom and those
Hmm.
qualities of humility and
Hmm.
non-judgmental help, I really
Hmm.
think you can change someone's life. I've seen evidence
Yeah.
of it. I've seen evidence of it, and we all need it.
Yeah, no question. I appreciate you mentioning humility because, like you said, you haven't lived, you're not human until you have had some humility. But it takes a tremendous amount of self-awareness to be comfortable enough to talk about that. That's not something that comes natural, particularly as a man. Um, but I will, as we wrap up, I remember Nick was his name, and I'm just using the sports analogy, right? Because these professional athletes, these are world-class athletes.
Hmm.
They have a very short time window of productivity, typically in their 20s, rarely in their late 30s or that. And he said a lot of what he did was just protecting them from all of this, the people around him,
Hmm.
mainly his own family,
Hmm.
the girlfriend. So a lot of things in the wheel, now I think about it, has been inspired through that, right? The relationships with women that would want things from him. His own family want with the money because they didn't, a lot of times they didn't have money. So for the first time, the family's coming into money, and and yeah, his well-being, his physical. Because if they got hurt, they go from hero to zero very quickly. An
Hmm.
injured athlete is a wounded animal, right? That's their whole self-worth is based on their ability to play. So managing them through those injuries and so yeah, now that I think about it, a lot of what the framework that we've created these 5 years of our life were probably inspired by these conversations. And then, and like as I mentioned him earlier, but another good friend of mine was a professional NFL head coach, and I over the years of doing different events with him, often I would deal with his agents, which were located here in the Bay Area. Great people, by the way. I mean, really quality people. And the amount of
Hmm.
trust they would often handle their money, all the financing, all those different things would go through the agent.
Hmm.
Even as like we would do fundraisers and golf tournaments and things together, all that actually went through the agency too.
Yeah.
Everything went through the agency because they were
Yeah.
protecting them, protecting the brand, and making sure that they would focus on what they were doing at the time. He was a coach, really interesting to see
Yeah.
now. I reflect back on it about how much of that was built into this framework that we developed.
Yeah, and, thinking about the framework, think about if it's true, and we believe it to be true, that if one of these five areas of your life are off, if
Hmm.
you're struggling with your finances or you're struggling in your relationship or which just pick one, doesn't matter. The other four are going to suffer. And
Yep.
so if we can only keep our eyes on one ball at a time, which is probably part of human nature as well,
Hmm.
the agent can keep his eyes on the other four while we work on the one that's suffering. Because just
Yep.
as an example, and you know this, I'm sure you feel the same way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm physically fit, everything
Hmm.
else in my life is better. You know,
No
if I
question.
have an abundant mindset with regard to money and I'm flush, my account's full, and I got some recurring revenue coming in, I'm walking on the clouds, right?
Hmm.
But if I'm not, everything else
Yep.
struggles, everything else. And
Yep.
so maybe this framework over the 5 years that we've been doing this together has evolved into this. It's as simple as that. You can
Hmm.
try to do anything you want to pull yourself out of the hole. But if there's somebody that can throw a rope down in there and get you out, then
Hmm.
why wouldn't you ask? And I think with men, in my experience, they don't like to ask for help. I don't like to ask for help, right?
Yeah.
When there was no GPS, we didn't used to ask for directions. It's a male thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe we can wrap with a little bit about the future, Jim, and what we're doing. We've said it before, but we're
Yeah.
doing a rebuild on the website. Lots of really interesting content
Hmm.
and opportunities with that. And we're
Hmm.
going to formalize a wrapper around our respective individual services to be offered. But if you
Hmm.
can't tell by now some of the work that we would help with, then we haven't done our
Yeah.
job, because
Yeah.
it's operating as agents on behalf of men who are struggling in some capacity and know they have the capability to go in a much higher gear, much more productive. They probably have already done it, and something in life
Hmm.
came in and stole that ability away. It happens to
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Mark, yeah, before, one thing that's really important, you mentioned something about technology. So, first of all, without technology, that always changes the world. Right? The Zoom technology is what allowed us to do this podcast in the last five
Yep.
years, which was a result of COVID. So that was a technology that really changed everything. We would have never been able to do this without that. But the technology that is before us at this very moment, it will change the world, it'll change civilization, is AI. And as you know, I refer to it as amplified intelligence, not an artificial intelligence. And I am so excited about what it can do, especially when you take life lived experiences and wisdoms and frameworks of, yeah, just it's just remarkable and exciting to see even what you're doing with some of your writing, what we're doing to push your best self out using these technologies and this framework combined is really exciting stuff. I
Yeah,
think we're,
just as an example, Jim, I don't know that I'd ever shared this with you, but I just decided one day, months ago now, I got this transcript for this episode.
Mhm.
What am I creating the show notes for from scratch?
Yeah.
Like, I feed it into Claude now, and I don't really need to do much editing. It's not a promotional thing. It's not the
Yeah.
quality of it is astounding, is astoundingly accurate. It turns it out in 10 seconds.
Mhm.
And when I first did it, I thought, well, you better edit this. And then I read it from top to bottom. I said, I wouldn't touch a thing, you know?
Yeah.
Now, I don't use it for content creation if I'm doing brand
Mhm.
work or copywriting or
Mhm.
newsletter writing or anything like that. I want those to be as authentic as possible. I use AI
Mhm.
to edit those and help me ideate and research, but I create
Mhm.
my own content. But it's just
Mhm.
a simple act like that. It took a half hour exercise and condensed it into 10 seconds,
Mhm.
multiply that by 100.
Yeah. Yeah. But the agency role, your personal brand and the technology of AI to build out that is something that's used to have to hire a copywriter, a web developer. If you want to do anything, whether it's to be paid for it or just to go out and um, do something, contribution or whatever it is, you have to build a brand. You have to build your personal brand. That's what sells. You have to be authentic. You have to, and that's where again I really see what we're doing is going to be helpful for anybody that is wants to whatever stage they're at in their life, particularly later on where they're a little more mission driven than they were in the past as far as career driven.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Once you
Yeah,
get
no, I
that
think
tightened up and you get clear on who you are and what you want to say, I just couldn't be a more exciting time.
yeah, yeah. So I will conclude with, I'd like to mention this. We're excited about where we're going. We're happy with where we've been and learned a ton, and really are very excited and interested in helping whoever we can. So if anyone is, you don't have to wait for our formal product or service delivery to be ready. It's ready. It's ready now in terms of being able to help people. We just have to button it up in terms of the site being put together and the right buttons in the right place and all that kind of structure stuff. But, look us up, man, and help us out. Go to the Apple platform, particularly, and give us a review. Hey, criticize us if you want. Feedback is feedback. Give us some stars, and that spreads the word. Because I think, and you and I have talked about this a lot, I think the hunger is for human connection.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a lot of guys that are struggling right now, and it's not necessary. When I went looking for resources and when I was in the shit, there weren't many. There are a lot for women. There aren't many for men. And I think it's because men don't like to talk about their feelings or they don't think they should talk about their feelings. That's complete bullshit, right?
Mm.
So, and there's stories about why we're in this mess right now, but it's a couple of steps out. It's right there for you. And if it's not us,
Mhm.
find somebody else. But if you try to do it
Yeah.
on your own, that's hard, man. I tried that for a long time. It's hard.
Yeah.
We need help.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff, Mark. Till next
Thank,
week.
thanks, Jim. See you.